So, welcome back to Silmarillion Total War and to another battle replay, and I'm going to be doing a couple of, well, I think 3 Silmarillion replays potentially in a row here. I'm going to be doing the intro recordings in one batch today, and then I'm going to be piecing them out through the rest of the week because there is a heatwave on in the UK at the moment, and my PC is really not enjoying it, my recording PC anyway. So I'm going to be doing some non-siege battles basically, because it seems to be that they can get through the recording of these just fine, although this is the hottest day of the heatwave. So I'm just going to be recording the intros today and then carrying on with the main portions of the battle replays throughout the rest of the week, and hopefully this means that I can actually fill my schedule. I will be putting up a little message on YouTube detailing the situation as well, because it has forced me to change my plans somewhat, and this is coming after I recorded the recent channel update video as well, explaining that there may be a little bit of a disruption anyway, so this is only added to that. But irregardless, thanks to Lord of Belagost and also the Silmarillion Discord posting up many of their battle replays in a specific channel, I can pick out a few and do them basically. 26,000 frames for a field battle as well is fairly substantial, given that this is quite an open one. I believe this one is called the Dwarf Road. Obviously the road running right through the middle of the map. There are a few terrain features, but for the most part it's going to be all about manoeuvring and getting yourself decent map control and then forcing your enemy back onto the defensive if you can. It is going to be no evil factions actually on display. I don't know whether this is part of the RP series. I'm going to assume not, because of all the 6 players on the field today, there are no duplicates of factions, so I'm going to assume that this is just a standard battle that's been played. But the team captains, based on the replay name, is going to be Fingolfin on the blue team and the Falathrim on the red team. So we'll go through, considering it's a field battle, the blue team first and foremost, if my mouse will cooperate. And we shall start off with the player over here, which is going to be the Naugrim, the most recent addition to Silmarillion. Silmarillion is less about these heavier factions than many other Medieval 2 mods tend to be, but the Naugrim certainly fit into that role. The Iron Guardsmen of Belagost here are a very accomplished unit of line infantry, and considering the kind of opposition they're going up against, I believe they're up against the Avari over on this side of the map, which is kind of interesting because it's going to mean that the Avari are going to be trying to avoid an engagement for as long as possible, whereas the Naugrim are going to have to try and pick their way through the trickery that the Avari can inflict upon them. So we shall have to wait and see how durable the Naugrim are going to be in the face of this guerrilla warfare. We've got the Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer, which are a unit we haven't actually seen from the Naugrim just yet. 123 of them. They certainly look very nice. They look almost like a slightly updated version of the Highborns of Erebor over in Reforged. Very, very nice. Obviously, as with most Dwarven units, they're going to be very tanky. We'll see how they perform as well against the Avari. They also have their chariots, the Iron Legion Engineers, which this is still just a placeholder unit model for the time being, but they work in the same way that any chariots are going to. Plenty of mass. They've also got their deadly projectiles from the back. They don't have a lot of volume on those projectiles, but going to be useful nonetheless. We'll see, and that's also the sort of thing which can be used to hunt down disparate Avari units as well, so that's something that the red team are going to have to be prepared for. We've got some axe throwers of Naugrim over here, so they're going to be pretty good at trading back and forth with the throwing projectiles that the Avari can field. There's also the other factions they're facing off against as well, the Falathrim being in the middle. The axe throwers are pretty good at dealing with some of the lighter units that the Falathrim can traffic in. We shall have to wait and see on that. We've got more Iron Guardsmen forming up the main body of this Naugrim army, really. And that's not too surprising, because as far as line infantry units go, if you base an army around this, there's relatively few factions in the game which can put up a front line which is going to be as tough as this. They're also very capable of getting some good kills as well. Just in behind here we've got some Dragon Slayers of Azagal, which are a more aggressive focused infantry unit. You can see that they wield their axes. Just in general as well, they look like they mean business in terms of their bloodlust, more so than the other Dwarven units, and that's not too surprising. Again, if the Avari get involved in a melee fight with these guys, they're going to perform very, very poorly, and that will be to the Naugrim's benefit. We've got some stone hewers back here. I mean, it does pay to bring some armour piercing as well if you're the dwarves, because of course the Falathrim most certainly can field some heavy army units. And over on the other side of the field as well, you may encounter Finarfin at some point, and against them armour piercing will most certainly be useful at dealing with some of the higher end Nargothrond units. And last but by no means least, we have the High Thanes of the Halls of Pearl, which is the bodyguard unit that the Naugrim can field, one of the tankiest and best units of shielded infantry that the game has to offer. I don't know if it is the best, but that's something which can be left up to speculation for the time being. Obviously very, very potent, and the sort of unit which, if it comes down to a scrap between just a few unit models late on, the High Thanes could be the thing to send the blue team over the edge. Now then, into the middle. The player who posted this replay up in the Silmarillion Discord is Waffles, and he is playing as Fingolfin, already in range of the Falathrim across the way, just down the road. He's got his marksman of Barad Aithel here on the front line, which, as far as an arch unit goes, many of the Elven factions have got their heavy archer be something a little bit special, a little bit different. Doriath do, Finarfin do, but the marksman of Barad Aithel, they are just your stock standard, fairly tanky and decently damaging Elven archer. They may not have any bells or whistles on them, but they can still trade back and forth with the Philathrom quite well. I think actually the Philathrom probably got the slightly better, heavier archer for this sort of thing. But this is just the opening gambit from Fingolfin, and they will see the lay of the land and then move accordingly, I'm sure. Fingolfin, one of the better all-rounder factions that the game has to offer after all. Blazemen of Barad Aithel, as far as a heavy infantry unit goes as well, very nice. They lack a little bit of the armour that's a faction like, for example, Feanor have, but they do make up for that with a little bit more melee defense, and just in general they are a very dependable frontline combatant that the Elves of Fingolfin can rely upon. Dragon Guard of Dorlomin, another throwing projectile unit with their throwing axes. I believe they're an armour piercing one as well, if I remember. I think I remember them having the green trail behind them denoting that armour piercing. If that's true, then it doesn't really matter what unit they hit in the opposition ranks, it's going to be effective. But it does also mean that they are going to be one of the first ports of call for the enemy to try and defang, so to speak, because a unit like this, if you let it get into position and let it do damage, then you're going to be in trouble, because those kills can rack up very quickly, especially in a field battle like this, where one collapse can result in your entire team losing map control. Sentries of Hithlum, pikes of course are few and far between. Interesting to see the Naugrim not bringing their pikes, but then they are very expensive, unlike the Sentries of Hithlum, which are relatively basic in terms of what they offer, but still, as an anchor to the line, they offer Fingolfin something which very few factions can, and they do it for a decent price as well. The other pikes in the game, of course, from Finarfin and the Naugrim being very expensive, Fingolfin can do the same for a significantly lower price, but of course they do have weaknesses in areas where those other pike units do not. Just in behind we have some Blade Masters of Barad Aithel, more aggressive versions of the line infantry we've already seen, obviously capable of doing a lot of damage, especially against the more lightly armoured denizens of the Avari elves, and also the more entry-level units from the Falathrim as well. They will be very, very worried about them. The Thirdsmen of Dorlomin are here, so some auxiliary spearmen, plenty of them here at the back. I mean, they're fairly numerous, so just a nice little rear guard there, and they can also protect against cavalry, or they can be sent onto the front line to be a decent line-holding unit. They're not going to get much done in terms of killing against the kind of opposition the Silmarillion can throw up, but they can still be good at holding a line, as we have seen in the past. Marines of Vinyamar are here, so some standard javelins. They're going to be looking to do some damage. I believe they're skirmishing javelins, that means they're going to have more range, more ammunition, but no armour piercing. I think that's the case with the Marines of Vinyamar anyway. There are some Arimo Arantar, I should say, the more defensive of Fingolfin's bodyguard tier units. But I think based on the infantry setup, they've gone for a more defensive infantry outlook, maybe a slightly slower burn army, this one. And last but by no means least, we have the Arqueni of Findacano, which are a unit of horse archers, which have armour-piercing projectiles as well. I think they do actually have an anti-monster bonus as well, but there are no factions on the field today which can bring monstrous units. Actually, the Ents might can, mightn't they? So maybe we shall see such a thing. We'll have to wait and see. Now then, the final force on this side of the battlefield, we have Panthan of Barsoom, who's playing as the House of Haleth, another very ambush-styled faction, not unlike the Avari, and considering they're up against Finarfin as well on this side, it's almost going to mirror the battle in many ways. The middle factions are going to be sort of trading back and forth with their all-rounder armies with archers and infantry and combined arms, and then on the two flanks we've got two heavier factions having to wrestle with the conundrum of going after a faction which is a little bit more ambush-centric. The House of Haleth maybe are a little bit more well prepared for dealing with someone straight up, even if it wouldn't be their first choice. Something like the dismounted Mardraut of Malduin here, for example, have got their armor-piercing javelins. They're also very capable of defending themselves in melee, so that's 2 units of them, but it's a pretty expensive unit for the Haladin to have to invest a lot into. Speaking of which, we also have the Dowarwada of Ethelbrandia, another example of this as well, where armor-piercing javelins, something else which another unit which Finarfin is going to have to be very much on the lookout for. They're going to be a bit more capable of dealing damage in melee as well, however. They are effectively the Haladin's bodyguard tier unit in spite of only being a single HP infantry unit. More Dowarwada, so going in certainly for the expensive armor-piercing javelins, which gives him a smaller army to work with here, Panthan, but we'll see. Swerdebrothia of Thargalion are the line infantry unit that the Haladin can field. They are relentless as well, so they can keep attacking through damage, which makes them a more tricky customer to deal with than you would initially think. I mean, they're still not going to be able to outright defeat the kind of units that Finarfin can throw at them, but they are the kind of front line which can do a surprising amount of damage to you if you're not careful, and then the Haladin can win the battle through other means. So this is the kind of unit that the Avari do not have access to, as I'm sure we shall find out pretty soon. Another unit of Swerdebrothia there. There's going to be plenty of hidden units as well, so some Dragoons, which are a unit of dismounted archers, some mounted Mardraut of Malduin over here as well. So obviously they're going to have their arm-piercing javelins too. Considering Finarfin don't have access to cavalry, this is going to be the sort of thing which the Haladin, in terms of mobility, can really hold over them too. And another unit of chariots. We have the Waldskreiter Wain Riders, which, I mean, you only have to look at them to know that individually speaking they're not going to be as tough as the Dwarven chariots, but I actually feel as though a more numerous chariot unit is always going to be more useful, because chariots, once they get bogged down, doesn't matter how individually tanky they are, they're going to die off quickly. Whereas if you have more of them, as we see with Canned over in Reforged, you can really make that pay for you, and that's the sort of unit which, as well, if deployed at the right time against Finarfin, could prove to be a real boon for them. Swordsman of Talath Dianin from Finarfin, played by Mevin here. He's also got some company of Prince Gwindor, so more medium units with swordsmen, javelins. It's the sort of force which should trade off quite nicely against the Haladin. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, sort of thing which the Swerdebrothia can match up quite nicely against, but there's not enough Swerdebrothia to really comprehensively take on Finarfin in a pure melee fight. There is also the Catapult over here, manned by the Wardens of Nargothrond, which could force some movement from the Haladin, but the Haladin can hide so many of their units, and they can also do hit and run so much that I'm not sure the Catapult is actually going to be the thing which forces the Haladin's hand. I mean, it kind of depends really on if Panthan panics or not. We've got some more Defenders of Talath Dianin over here, some Marksmen of Nargothrond and Wardens of Nargothrond on the flanks, so armor-piercing spears, split-shot projectiles. I mean, if the Haladin do get caught out in the open, then these archers will be the sort of thing which will certainly worry them a great deal. And that's all we can see, but I'm sure there's going to be some hidden units. Again, there's some more Nargothrond units over here on the flank. In the middle, the second team captain is going to be Wally Wolf, playing as the Philathrom. Like I mentioned, the Marksman of Balar should have the beating of Marksman of Barad Ithel in a long-range skirmish fight, so initially, at the very least, the onus is going to be forced upon Fingolfin, I would imagine, here in the middle. Warriors of Eglarest are here as well, so more of a medium unit, as well as Marines of Eglarest with their spears. The Eglarest unit's more of a medium tier unit. I think individually, this is where Fingolfin will be able to match up quite nicely against the Falathrim. The Barad Ithel infantry units are going to be stronger than the Eglarest ones, but the support that all of the Falathrim javelins can give might be a bit of a difference maker there as well. And let's not forget the Aran Kia Lim, which are a tier above. In terms of heavily armoured elven infantry units, they are one of the strongest that the game has to offer. They can't be brought in great numbers, but they are the sort of thing which can really make the centre of the line very, very strong indeed. We have some Mariners of Erendil, which are going to be sort of a morale-boosting unit here in the middle of the Philathrom army, and of course individually they are stronger than the standard Eglarest units that they take a unit model from as well. Rangers of Brithombar, so a secondary archer unit. When the heavier archers have done their grinding work, the lighter archers can come in later on and pick up the slack. The Nobles of Baelor are another unit which could come in very handy. Of course, they are going to have to potentially tangle with pikes that can outrange them, but as far as an infantry unit goes, they are significantly tankier. They're going to be better. They're less fragile to changing battlefield conditions than the pikes across the way, so it all depends on how things develop. But the Nobles of Baelor, fantastic anchor. Scouts of Eglarest, so cavalry could be the sort of thing which I think the red team are going to be using cavalry a bit more defensively, perhaps because of the Haladin over on the flank, and then there's chariots from the dwarves roaming around as well, so I'm going to assume that the red team are going to try and post up a bit more defensively because of that. More marines of Eglarest as well. Finally, we have the Avari, played by Captain Gervais. Now, I'd imagine that we're not going to see too much of the Avari, even more so than the Haladin, because they're all about that hiding lifestyle. Bow wards of the Darkling Woods are basic spears. I mean, if you do need to throw in something on the front line to be sort of ablative armour to your match-winning units, then the bow wards are always going to be that. They're going to really struggle against dwarven infantry, but that's no great surprise. It's going to be other things which the Avari are going to have to depend on to win this particular battle. The Thorncasters are one such way they can do that. Obviously they can do pretty decent damage with their thrown projectiles. I don't know what would be best to go after from the Dwarven army. It depends really on how the dwarves decide to move forward, because I'm sure they will move forward, but we just have to wait and see. Shades of the Guarded Path are pretty much as good as it gets for Avari infantry. They're very dangerous, but they're more dangerous against lightly armoured units, considering that they have a high base attack but no armour piercing, which is obviously the opposite thing that you want really against the dwarves. What you really want is a bit of AP to crack through their heavy plate armour, but having said that, they're still going to be able to trade quite nicely with some of the dwarven infantry, more so than many of the other Avari combatants. The Host of the Withered Ash. This is one unit which, particularly without the dwarven pikes, actually could prove to be very, very decisive if the Avari can get the dwarves down to... If they really bog them down in a fight and it turns into a pit battle, then the Host of the Withered Ash could be the sort of thing to help the Avari equalise the odds a little bit. And that's all we can really see. I mean, you can see that there's a little bit more of a scattered approach. There is the Grandfather of the Deepwood Hearth over here as well, which, yeah, I mean, as far as a moving artillery piece goes, it's the sort of thing which will force the Naugrim to come forward, but they were always going to be coming forward, I think. But yeah, I don't think we're going to have to wait too long, considering the archers are already in range of each other here in the middle. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. I was hoping to pick a slightly cooler day to start recording, but I think today might actually be even hotter than when I recorded the intro, so we're going to have to wait and see how this goes. Hopefully this battle isn't so demanding that my old PC decides to spontaneously combust like everything else. Marksman Barrett Ithel, however, are going to be opening things up as we mentioned, and we're going to be seeing a little bit of trading back and forth between themselves and the Falathrim. I don't know, I still say the Philathrom are going to have the better of this, at least initial skirmishing fight, although they do have some infantry in range that maybe they could go after instead, and you can see the lighter units are the first port of call for the Marksman Barrett Ithel. This does of course mean that the skirmish fight will definitely be won by the Philathrom, but it does also mean that the Philathrom are likely to actually take more losses. These Brithombi units may have shields, but those arrows from the Fingolfin force are likely to have the desired effect. Meanwhile, axe throwers of Naugrim going to be moving in here, and you can see the dense formations of the bow wards. I think actually what we will do, at least to start with, is go down to half speed, because we're seeing at least some action in every part of the battlefield so far. The bow wards taking hits, but the Thorncasters also going to be returning fire. And the Naugrim units are the best, or well, I say, they are the best target for the Avari to be going after with such things, because they are the weakest classification unit that the Naugrim have. They also represent maybe the thing which can contest where the Avari are at their strongest, so that is also worth bearing in mind. Meanwhile, see over here we do have some scouts of Tauren far off, which have revealed themselves over here on the flank. Anthan and Barsoom's Haladin army moving forward, some Waldschreider dragoons, trying to get some initial hits off, but horse archers are not going to do too well in a straight up skirmish fight against foot archers, because there are simply less of them, especially when you consider that the Haladin are not really renowned for their armour either. Not completely defenceless in such ways, but they're not going to last too much longer if they hover in the range of the scouts for too much more time. But we shall have to wait and see. There's also the small matter of the flanking force here, the Iron Legion Engineers, which could prove to be a real difference maker here, because the Avari can entrap infantry in their web well enough, especially when it comes to dwarven infantry, but when it comes to having to deal with the unit of chariots rampaging around, that may prove to be very different. Scouts of Eglarest charging in here, offering a little bit of support to their ally, with Fingolfin still a little bit further back. The only army to really advance any great distance so far is Tundra and his Naugrim. Scouts of Eglarest coming back for yet another charge. With how thinly spread the unit is, it's not actually going to do as much damage as it otherwise would, but it's still easy kills, really, for a unit of sword cavalry, which I was expecting to be used almost entirely defensively, so there is that as well. The Mardraut of Malduin now moving forward, but I don't think this is the best choice of target for them. Mardraut of Malduin, after all, are a unit of armour-piercing javelins. You can see they're also being absolutely ripped apart by marksmen of Nargothrond and swordsmen of Philathrom. This is the kind of unit that you can't afford to use too lightly. I'm sure they are going to be racking up a few decent kills, but they're going after the Wardens now, which is definitely the better target over the Scouts. The Wardens representing a real problem potentially for the Haladin in melee later on. What we've got going on here. And you can see that there are some Avari moving forward, backed up by some Marines of Eglarest, so potentially alongside the Avari, going to try and move in and attack as one. I mean, the Bow Wards of the Darkling Woods have moved forward, and they're going to need the support of the Falathrim if they are to be victorious here. Meanwhile, we also have some artillery, well, I say artillery action, Nafatoon action. The miners of Nogrod must be nearby. That is what their projectile does inflict. The grandfather of Fleetwood Hearth is here. Thorncasters now moving into melee, and as far as melee capacity goes, these tree clash units can survive quite a long time, but they will still lose fairly handily to these quality dwarven infantry units. Branch Stalkers of the Green Sea, dual wielding unit, they should be better in melee, but I don't know whether without armour piercing they're going to be able to crack through the Iron Guardsman's tough outer shell. Meanwhile, Rangers of the Hidden Path launching a volley of javelins into the Iron Legion engineers, and all of them now bloodied, so they're not going to last very long in melee at all. You can see the artillery there streaking through the sky. What are they going after? Ulfedin of Ethelbrandia. Worthwhile to go after them. Berserker class units, dangerous in melee. They actually have higher mass as well, so they will push through enemy units as they attack, but they will fizzle out eventually. But still, one of the tougher units that the Haladin can bring to bear simply because of that second hit point. Meanwhile, Falathrim moving forward, you can see Fingolfin have repositioned to try and prevent this flanking movement from the Falathrim, so the entire Falas army now is moving across to meet this movement. Sentries of Hithlum are right there, as well as the Dragon Guard of Dorlonen. I mean, this is a good opportunity here for those skirmishing javelins and the archers of Falathrim to actually kill off not one but two important units potentially for Fingolfin as the battle wears on. Meanwhile, we also have the Arqueni Findakano moving into position. Time will tell what they want to be charging into. Scouts of Eglarest charging around the backfield, trying to deal with the Iron Legion engineers and having some success at that as well. The two units of infantry, actually no, 3 units of infantry mainly, that were accompanying the chariots now moving in as well. They have managed to catch out the Rangers of the Hidden Path in melee. If they still had javelins, that's a very good catch by the Naugrim. Chariots still attempting to move. The cavalry support over here going to be very important. The first refusers utilising their slings as well. Slingers tend to have low base damage, but it's still armour piercing, and it can be surprisingly vicious over a period of time. Already the Arqueni Findakano learning that the hard way. I think the Naugrim positionally, they would have been hoping for a slightly different engagement, but I still do think that overall the survivability of their units in comparison to the ones that the Avari are having to send forward now should stand them in pretty good stead, but you can see in certain positions the Iron Guardsmen are actually being overrun. The pure base damage of the Branch Stalkers having the desired effect, and also nearby the Arankia Limb offering a level of tankiness that the Avari themselves cannot match. This is also where Fingolfin start to blur into the Dwarven ranks as well. The Dragon Slayers have come forward. Plenty of units, Bladesmen, Baradithel, Ethelbrandia. That's a different set of units entirely. Marines of Eglarest holding the line quite well. I think Fingolfin, seeing what's going on, now they have the opportunity to move forward and attack a little bit more directly, and a lot of these more basic units here. There goes the Avari General. Dwarven bodyguard in the background as well. Having to send forward the nobles of Balar pretty quickly, because I don't think the Falathrim were prepared for a strike this fast. More units coming forward as well. I mean, this over here, this unit of Blazemen are going to be overrun probably. I mean, the Feardsmen that might be different. The Falathrim's higher numbers here standing them in pretty good stead, though, you'd have to say, because they're able to cover their angles a little bit more easily. And here and there, where their Noldor units lurk, they seem to be having the better of the engagements against Fingolfin so far, but I mean, this is a fairly strange Fingolfin army in that it doesn't have some of the more aggressive Edain units. I'm speaking particularly about the Ithlam archers with their axe, and especially, of course, the Sons of Húrin. The Iran Kielin starting to get overrun now, a combination of Dwarven and Elven units that they're facing off against. They're going to need the Avari to return the favour as it pertains to supporting them. But I have to say, actually, the Avari have done pretty damn well on the front line. They've drawn the Dwarves in and beaten them in several areas, but it's over here on this flank where a bit of a concentration of forces occurred, as well as a flanking move from the infantry from behind, and this is going to spell disaster, I think, for the Avari, because moving down now are going to be all of these reinforcements to undo all of the good work that they've managed to achieve so far, including the High Thanes. Very little damage as well, the High Thanes so far, which is probably a bad sign. Scouts of Eglarest trying to deal with some units which have also breached the front line. This is the problem of playing as an ambush-heavy faction as well. When things start to go south, they go south pretty quickly. This means that the Philathrom are going to need, really, to defeat Fingolfin on this front line, which they may be able to do, but this is where the pikes are really going to start to pull their weight as well, because even if the Philathrom, as it looks like, is slowly gaining the upper hand, it's not going to be quick enough before reinforcements arrive. Swordsmen of Talath-Din and Stalkers of Tor and Faroth moving over here, so still very much seeing a battle of manoeuvring over here, but from Finarfin's perspective, I think Mevin will feel as though he can simply wait, because his team so far seems... oh well, Panthan of Barsoom is the one who can simply wait. I think Mevin, with how things have started to go south for the Avari, he may need to start being a little bit more aggressive than he would like, which should play into the hands of the Haladin with their ambush-style tactics, lots of javelins being employed as well. Bit of friendly fire potentially on those dragoons. I mean, again, maybe he wouldn't be using javelins on these stalkers. Another example of maybe his opponent not utilising his tools as efficiently as he possibly can, but like I said, for Mevin, I think a little bit more urgency may be on the agenda. Even if said urgency was sending over some support for the Falathrim, because I really don't think the Haladin want to move forward, so I think from Finarfin's perspective you could get away actually with sending over reinforcements, although the window for that opportunity may already have passed. Fighting more or less on an even footing here, but you can see that the numbers and the pikes that Fingolfin have at their disposal make life much more difficult for the Falathrim than it otherwise would have been. And this is where maybe a little bit more targeting from the archers earlier on would have come in very handy. Blademaster Barad-Ithel, a dedicated heavy swordsman unit, going to be slowly but surely carving their way through the marksmen of Balar. Blademaster Barad-Ithel also moving forward, a couple of units of them. I think it's more clean-up duty now for these forces over here. I mean, it's not as if the dwarves are escaping from this battle unscathed. Indeed, they have a pretty small army remaining, but it does include chariots. Marqueni Findakano running out of the ranges of the Hidden Path. The first refusers are still alive. Got that sword on their backs. Now moving in. Guardsmen Balagos still in decent numbers as well, and the High Thanes. I mean, yeah, having a look at this, it's a decent victory for the dwarves, but a lot of it is owed to that flanking move and also that little bit of support that Fingolfin gave. Certainly tilted the odds. It's not as if the Philathrom didn't support the Avari, but they supported them in a place where it was easy for Fingolfin to counter, whereas Fingolfin were right on the other side. Rangers of Brithombar now being tasked with holding back heavier infantry units from Fingolfin, which is not a great sign for them. Baroness of Erendil getting into melee as well. They were being held back in auxiliary for quite a while. Marines of Brithombar, the lines are starting to be breached. The superior numbers of Fingolfin down here in this section of the field starting to have an impact. There are also now some arriving Finarfin units. The Wardens of Nargothrond, a worrying sight. There goes the Fingolfin general as well. I mean, morale may prove to be an issue as we get to the sharp end of this battle. Marger out of Malduin trying to prevent Finarfin from sending over yet more reinforcements. I mean, they need to be careful though, because defenders of Talathdin, and the longer they stay in melee, the worse it's going to be for them. Over here, scouts of Tauren far off. Finarfin sending over yet more of their forces. This is going to force the Haladin's hand, and this may be the last truly decisive action in the battle. Some units being sent across, but individual pockets of Haladin resistance will not be... As I say that, with Darawada, Swerda, Brothia, this is one of the better combinations of units that Haladin have for a fight like this, where it's just a real mosh pit. And it's not as if this is the best of Finarfin's units either. I mean, the company of Prince Gwindor can hold their own. There's some Warder of Ethelbrandir as well. Warder of Brethel, isn't it? Yeah. The basic spears of the Haladin, they will be outclassed by pretty much everything Finarfin have to offer. But more Swerda Brothir, I mean, this is going to be a fairly bloody encounter, this. I think the Haladin were trying to transit across the field and Finarfin had to block them. But I do feel as though the Haladin will actually win this fight. This little engagement over here. Warder of Brethel moving backwards. Finarfin, I mean, the catapult trying to get into position could yet prove to also be a real difference maker. There's still a fight, I believe, going on here in the backfield. Axe throwers of Nogrod, Rangers of the Hidden Path returning. I mean, it's still really just trying to clean up what remains of the Avari. Rangers of the Hidden Path in the first refusers, though, one of the strongest units the Avari could have left in this capacity, and they may be able to surround and finish off these Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer. Only a military genius could win this battle, apparently. Moving further onwards. Still the catapult reins in. Now in place, hitting the Dragon Slayers, doing a good job there, although the Falathrim are actually the ones that rout as a result of that. They were under a lot of pressure. The catapult is going to need to do the business pretty quickly. The Avari still have the grandfather of the Deepwood Heart. As soon as I say that, of course, he perishes at the hands of all these spears and poor infantrymen. Yeah, looking at this, I don't think the Falathrim's front line is going to last all that much longer, so Finarfin's assistance is coming a little bit too late, I feel, to really change the direction in which this battle is going, but I could be wrong. Those High Thanes are going to be a real problem as well. I don't think... I'll say that, I mean, there's a lot of good battling going on down here, but if the Iran Keelim were to rout and they are wavering, then things could take a downward spiral pretty quickly. The Stone Hewers are here, Dragon Slayers on the way forward. More and more reinforcements are arriving. The catapult crew, of course, being the Wardens of Nargothrond, means they do have real applications in melee too. Swerda Brothir are starting to arrive. That was the Haladin general. Interesting that so many of these units are just trying to scramble to the central fight the Falathrim are involved in. They're actually ignoring one another as they go, other than this large engagement here. Still, victory is probably going to be going towards the Haladin here, but the company of Prince Gwindor will take their fair share of kills, but they need an outright victory at this point somewhere on the field, the red team. I mean, let's not forget as well, there is an engagement happening over here, which may prove to be pretty decisive. You can see that with a lot of the more survivable units that Haladin have being sent over to that engagement, stuff like the Rigswehr are not going to be enough to defeat some of the central units to Finarfin, marked on Nargothrond in place as well. There's still some Swerda Brothir over here, but like I said, they can go toe to toe with the mid-tier units of Finarfin, but they're not going to be able to outright win, especially not when they've had their positions compromised like this. the Mardrout of Malduin need to make up their mind what they're going to do. I mean, shooting into the marksman of Nargothrond would not be the worst idea. Is that what he's going to do? Yes. The highest volume of shots there, and very quickly these split shots are carving their way through. So Finarfin are going to be victorious over here by hook or by crook, but it's also the Warns of Nargothrond that they're going to need to hope that they can then start working their way through the rest of the map. They're spread across most areas now, Finarfin. Pretty much the only member of their team left standing that can be terribly useful. I don't think the Falathrim, by the time we get over here, are going to have too much left in the tank. Indeed, it looks as though most of them are gone, if not all of them. Yeah, the Arankialim routing, and that means the Naugrim and most of Fingolfin's army can continue their march as well. Arantar fighting. I mean, there are these Warns of Nargothrond. Their armor piercing will be helpful, but you can see just from the shape of the engagement, this isn't going to be the best thing for them. Unfortunately for them, defeat is a distinct possibility. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle, which is strange. So both sides are apparently staring down the barrel of defeat. I guess with this many losses, whoever wins it is going to be highly pyrrhic for them. High Thanes of the Halls of Pearl. I mean, again, this is another unit like the Irimo Arantar. Elite units are not the be-all and end-all, but when you have access to them in the late game and your opposition doesn't, it's going to be a puzzle for them to work out how they can actually deal the necessary damage, and by the time Finarfin comes around to trying to unfurl that conundrum, I think that was one of the doors slamming because I've got the windows open, but yeah. They're not going to have really anything that they can utilise to their advantage. Arcani Vindicano still running around. So the Company Prince Windor moving across, so were Finarfin victorious over here? I feel as though still the Wayne Riders, apparently. There's only one of them that I can see, so the unit might be heavily split at this stage. Weirdly enough, Finarfin won the engagement. Well, this would explain why they've managed to turn things around over here at Haladin. They have got the Ulfedin now getting involved. That's the sort of unit which can certainly crack through the armour of the Nargothrond units from Finarfin. Interesting that there are still over 10k frames left to go. With the fact that at this point it's going to be more sporadic engagements. I still think that at this point we are looking at a rather inevitable blue team victory. Maybe I'm wrong. The Wayne Riders are still here. Another useful tool for them to use. I keep thinking the Haladin are on the other side for some reason, but nope. They are on the team which is in the ascendancy. Stalkers of Tauren far off than all of the units that were somehow victorious against that clutch of Haladin units. Maybe they were continuously siphoning off more infantry to try and help their allies down here, Haladin, and as a result they were able to win. I mean, the Company of Prince Windor proving themselves to be quite effective frontline combatant, regardless of what was actually going on there. Meanwhile, Sentries of Ithram starting to run away. I mean, the loss of the Fingolfin general earlier on, and actually the first refusers are still here. And they are starting to really carve their way through some of the more exposed units from Fingolfin, and this is something that they do need to be a little bit aware of here, to be honest with you, because things are starting to turn around on that, with Fingolfin all of a sudden running for the hills in multiple places. The collapse of their morale, a significant one. Whatever happened to the Irimo? There they are, but they're kind of alone at this point. There's not all that much left. The Warns of Nargothrond are still alive as well, with armour piercing combined with the numbers that the company of Prince Gwindor can still provide, that may very well be enough to at the very least kill off the Anima. They could then try and do the same thing on the High Thanes. Still little individual cavalry units running around the Arqueni Findicano trying to charge in, but these first refusers have been steadily going about their work. Polschreiter Wain Riders. Victory seems certain. Just trying to take stock of really what the opposition have left. Prince Gwindor still in decent health. Stalkers of Tor and Faroth are still there. Wardens of Nargothrond. Sentries of Hithlum coming back. I mean, they will probably rout pretty quickly, but if they can be supported, late game pikes could be the answer for the blue team. Because Aranki Alim are not going to return, unfortunately, for the Reds. Nargothrond will be hoping to finally kill off that one remaining Arqueni Findicana. But still, over 10k frames remaining. A very puzzling state of affairs, and there's still a few little engagements happening here and there. Ulfadin of Ekelbrandi are starting to fall away now with their hit point expended. They are fairly vulnerable, and the Wardens of Nargothrond have got the defensive abilities to overcome. There is also a fight happening way over here, which has slipped under the radar a little bit. The dismounted Mardrout of Malduin, one of the better Haladin units in melee as well. I don't know though, they should be able to overcome the defenders of Philathrom, especially with the support of a second unit of Mardrout as well. So 2 units of Mardrout will be alive, the Wardens of Nargothrond over here will be alive, so both sides will have some decent quality spears that they can throw into the mix later on. That could prove to be fairly decisive. Victory seems certain for the red team down here, which is kind of interesting. There went, I believe that was the Finarfin general, however, so fighting on more of an even footing with Fingolfin now. The Dwarven general must still be alive, surely. The High Thanes are over here. He does have a fairly distinct model, so we should be able to see him, especially amongst the very ostentatious High Thanes. And indeed there he is, in the classic pink armour that the Dwarven general for some reason has had for quite a while in both games at this point. First refusers getting in here as well though. I mean, this is the thing, the dwarves look like they're on their last legs and going to be defeated, so Finarfin's actions do seem to have turned this battle around. The assistance as well from the few Avari that managed to withstand the initial Dwarven and Fingolfin onslaught has also proved to be pretty damn important. First refusers, I think, I mean, yeah, they may as well charge in here. It still says victory seems certain for the 14 High Thanes, so a quick charge in the rear should be enough to turn that around. When I say charge, it looks like they're just going to wander into melee, but maybe they don't have the energy left to mount a charge. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Things certainly turning around now. Melee defense being robbed of the High Thanes. I think, yes, the Mardrouts. What are they doing? Why are they just leaving the defenders of Philathrom? I guess maybe they're seeing the fact that they're actually in pretty substantial danger here. Order of Brethil trying to surround the Wardens of Nargothrond to finish them off, but Bevan managing to find the gap. I still think the Haladin, without any outside influence over in this section of the battlefield, will be victorious, but I don't think it's going to be enough in the end. I think the red team have managed to successfully turn this one around. Are the High Thanes all dead? That was rather quick. No, not quite. There's 2 of them left. I mean, I have to say, I've been very impressed with how the first refusers have acquitted themselves in this particular battle. They've done very, very well for themselves. Names this one High Thane and his general. on an individual basis, certainly the High Plains will still be the stronger unit. The Dwarven General, I think, along with the Avari General, who... Is he here? Well, I was going to say they're the only ones left, but nope. The Dwarven General has been slain. What's going on here? Naugrim funneling all of his units across to try and deal with what remains of the Haladin. What does the Haladin have left? Can they hope to overcome Wardens of Nargothrond and the like? Swear Brothia, Dragoons, Spears, 14 Ulfadin, but their hit points are almost certainly going to be very low. They're going to have to deal with at least one fairly healthy unit of Wardens of Nargothrond, the Marjorans of Malduin retreating into the trees. I thought they were going to turn around and use their javelins for a second there, but so it begins. Still some Blade Masters of Baradithal over here. What they're going to do? They're taking the long way round, most certainly. I think Finarfin are going to have too much at this point, but I've been wrong already in this fight, so it wouldn't surprise me if I were wrong again. 32 Company of Prince Gwindor, that other unit of Marks of Nargothrond, but that unit of, Wardens of Nargothrond, the healthier one, not this one, is cut off really, and the Haladin could well completely destroy that unit before support ever really arrives. Over here, out. Swear Brothia is still here. I mean, Ulfadin trying to reconstitute their army, regroup, and get ready to face Nevin and his Finarfin host. They get those bladesmen of Baradithal down here as well. That would offer them some very appreciated melee skill. Still charging after this unit of 28 spears. I mean, unit of 28 at this point could prove to make all the difference, especially a unit it's a little bit on the tankier side, like the March route. What else have we got going on? Not a whole lot by the looks of things. What's going on here? We might need to indulge in a little bit of ×2 speed here. Purely because... Well, actually no, not for as long as I was fearing. I thought we were going to see a lot more kiting. And then a quick charge followed by a lot of routing. It's actually quite fortunate, I suppose, for the for Fingolfin that the Blade Masters are one of the units they have left. Probably one of the better units they could have in a situation like this. They'll be able to overcome the marksmen. The scouts of Tor and Faroth are not going to have the defensive abilities to withstand the heavy swordsmen, such as they are. Company of Prince Gwindor, which is actually where the Finarfin general was. He has since perished, however, so we're seeing the engagements happen now. So Company of Prince Gwindor may turn that other fight around. Actually, it is looking like the red team might be running out of steam here. So once again, flip-flopping around all over the place. I think if they were going to be victorious here, they needed to have their units all in one place. Finarfin, and the shape of the engagement needed to be suiting for their wardens, but as it is, I think they're going to be overrun. Defenders of Talathdin and running away. There's still a bit of ammunition in some of these Marge routes as well, which could very well prove to make all the difference. Dismounted Dragoons finishing off. Let's see, finishing off. There's still 25 of them remaining, but there should be enough Haladin over here to overcome the rather scary Nargothrond spears. I think it is a distinct possibility for them as well. But what is going to be the fate of this unit of bladesmen? Catapult crew and the wardens are over here, so there's a little bit of ammunition in those marksmen as well. The Thirster fuses are on the way across. Still some interesting back and forth which could happen here. I mean, this is going to be the end of Fingolfin's presence on the field. But the approaching first refusers, 29 of them still remaining, where it looked like Finarfin might be making a comeback yet again. The Avari's arrival may stunt that. dismounted Mardrout making their way down. So have they been completely victorious over here? I suppose they have. They managed to finish them off pretty quickly actually, but too surprisingly starting Sweaterbrook here. I think the Ulfadin have done quite a lot of the heavy lifting there as well with the high damage they're capable of chucking out. Now the Haladin need to move down here, ready to support the first refusers, who are... the first refusers, I keep thinking teams... Like, this is the thing, when it's not a themed battle I can get confused. The Avari are on Finarfin's team, aren't they? That does change things. I don't think the Haladin are going to be able to defeat the first refusers in outright melee efficiently, and there's a unit of Wardens of Nargothrond down there as well, so they better hope they've got enough ammunition left in the dismounted Mardrout to even the odds a little bit here. Sending off individual units to their doom is also not going to be the answer for the Haladin. Let's go up to ×2 speed. So the red team, once again, have flip-flopped so often in this battle about who I think is going to win, but a large part of that is just me forgetting about individual units that are still alive. But the Haladin are really going to struggle though to see their team over the line, surely. Reorganising themselves just a little bit here. Prince Gwindor. Brethel marching down here, but they're going to get absolutely dusted by Wardens of Nargothrond in their various guises. Dismounted Mardrout of Malduin. Yeah, I don't really feel as though scattering like this for the Haladin is necessarily the best thing to do. It's a lot of micro that can go wrong now at this point, and there's also only any point in this micro if you do actually have ammunition in those javelins. If you don't, then you may as well not bother, because all you're doing is extending the battle. But they do, so that's good to see. Catching them in melee with what's left of the Ulfadins. This is exactly the right thing to do. These javelins trying to kill off the first refusers. How many volleys they'll actually be able to get off before they have to leave. Yeah, there they go. Victory almost a certainty. That will surely change now that the Wardens of Nargothrond are fighting this battle in earnest. That armour piercing will crunch right through the scale mail that the dismounted Mardrout rely upon to keep themselves alive. Only a fool could lose this battle. Not really much else I can say about this at this point. I think the red team are going to have what it takes. Unless the Haladin have shown remarkable restraint and they reveal another hidden unit at this point. Once again, the first refusers really showcasing their abilities. Able to overcome what remains of the Mardrout. Might be the, on an individual basis, might be the best performing unit on the field today, the first refusers, especially considering how poorly the battle started for the Avari. The fact that Captain Gervais has been able to contribute this much to his team is really quite telling. Sweaterbroth here on the way out. Mortar of Brethel routing as well. Defeat almost a certainty. I mean, the dismounted Dragoons almost gone as well. I'm actually surprised the Haladin's morale is holding together better than I would have thought, to be honest. Are they turning this around? It's kind of hard to tell, but the numbers are fairly close. If the Mardrout can keep their morale together, maybe they can outlast what remains. I'd be surprised, given the armour piercing that the Wardens of Nargothrond traffic in. You can see the company of Prince Gwindor circling around to get the full surround off, which would deprive the Mardrout of their melee defense, a very important stat for spears. Not a charge, but still, definitely the right idea. First refusers victorious over here, so yeah, that's going to be it. the dying embers of this fight now. It was a very back and forth one, wasn't it? But in the end, it's going to be the red team that take this one away. Considering how this battle started with the blue team really seizing the initiative and breaking the Avari's position, and then the Falathrim struggling to hold on to the centre as long as they could, but maybe in the end the Haladin taking a little bit too long to truly engage Finarfin. Finarfin had their full army left after all when their comeback started. They got a lot of support after Finarfin, especially from the Avari that remained as the battle wore on, but the fact they had their full army left really, and even then the Haladin, they did try to move, but it was always going to be a rather strange situation for the Haladin to be in, hoping that they could maybe entrap Finarfin in their web, but Finarfin simply never moved forward, and that could have backfired. If the red team started to really handily lose elsewhere, then Finarfin, that would have been the wrong thing to do, but as it was, just about, I mean it's very fine margins here, but Finarfin, you can say, just about did the right thing here. First Refuse is moving in as well. The last stand of the Marge route. They have actually been withstanding the armor-piercing spear attacks and also just generally the up-close nature of the company of Prince Gwendol pretty well there, so it does go to show that they are, you know, one of the stronger Haladin units in melee, but they are still primarily a javelin unit, so like most things within the Haladin, they're not designed purely to monster their way through melee encounters, which is part of the reason why the Haladin haven't been able to see their team over the line here in the late game. They're just not that kind of faction. They need a little bit more muscle. If they were playing as one of the heavier factions and it turned into an infantry slog here in the late game, it could have been a very different story, but as it is, Finarfin had enough left to overcome. First Refuse is going to get in here. One final flourish in this battle, but I mean this is all that remains on the field that isn't routed. So under 50 units is what remains, so a close battle this, and well fought. It's one of those occasions as well where people can't simply say that the player who the replays from the perspective of was on the winning side, so that's nice. And there we have it. Difference 1%, which is not surprising. That doesn't take into account routing units, but probably under 1% to be fair if it was only units that were not routing still. And there we go. So a big thank you, weirdly enough actually, to a player who wasn't involved in this battle replay, Lord of Belagost, for pointing this one out to me, and big thank you to it was Waffles, wasn't it, who was the one who had the foresight to record it, so a big thank you to both of them and to all the players that were part of this one. Like I mentioned, a real back and forth. There's not really too much to be criticised here because both teams did things that were good, and there wasn't really any bad moves as such from either side. Like I said, I think it was over here between Finarfin and the Haladin where the inactivity in the end played into the hands of the red team, but that was only as a result of what was happening over on the other side. You know, it could so easily have gone in favour of the blue team, especially when the Avari really started to lose ground against that flanking move from the dwarves and Fingolfin. It could very easily have gone the other way, and Finarfin did send over support, to be fair. The Haladin weren't as much in a position to do that, maybe if they had reacted a little bit quicker, but that's really splitting hairs. I feel as though when a battle is this close, there are so many things that you could look at as being the decisive moment in a battle that, you know, there's no point in being that over-analysing things that much. I think that the red team here, good value for their victory. Mevin, when he did move forward with his full army, was able to make very good use of it. The Philathrom probably struggled the most of the red team players, but they were still able to really make the opposition pay in the middle there with their combined arms army, enough to the point where they were able to win the battle overall. And then there was the Avari, who started off perhaps predictably in a straight-up engagement against the dwarves pretty poorly, but as the battle wore on, they came more and more into their own with a smaller and smaller force. First Refusers, the Rangers of the Hidden Path, even the Grandfather of the Deepwood Hearth was loitering around on the field for quite a while, so yeah, you have to say that. I think if the blue team was to do anything differently, the Haladin maybe should have sent over support a little bit sooner, maybe forced Finarfin's hand a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of, to be fair. Other than that, it's about individual micro things. Let's see what did the damage, though, for the Fingolfin army, which is who we were watching from the perspective of. The Arimo Arantar were involved in a fairly grindy ground war. They managed to get 128 kills, which is fine, but maybe not as much as you would be hoping for. Much more defensive Fingolfin setup this than you would often see, like I said. You're not going to see as many kills on the Arimo as you would on something like the Sons of Hurin, especially where some of the Noldor units in the Falathrim are concerned. Sentries of Hithlum holding the line nicely. We actually saw them doing their job very well. If it weren't for them, then the Falathrim would have been really making life very, very difficult for Fingolfin. But as it was, Fingolfin ended up winning really the fight in the middle. It came at a big cost, but the pikes were a big part of that. The Dragon Guard may be less important than I was thinking at the start of the battle. The Bladesman and Blade Master Barad-Ithel doing pretty nicely, not too surprising against the lighter and medium units from the Phalos as well. Herdsmen of Dorloman being used as that auxiliary unit. Detachments, not many kills, but then they were just being sent in to make sure that the lines were holding. That's what you would expect from a unit of auxiliaries. Marines of Vinyard, didn't actually see them using their javelins as such, but they must have done, especially on the unit with 132 kills, given the fact that they're not that deadly in melee. Marksman of Barad-Ithel. The initial skirmish fight didn't actually last all that long, which is a good thing for Fingolfin, because I still say that the Marksman of Balar would have given them the edge there. The Arqueni Findicano were a bit of a disappointment though, but then they were getting targeted down by all sorts of throwing projectiles and archers, so it was quite difficult for Waffles to actually use them. But a unit that expensive and that potentially devastating is something that you want to be seeing more than 41 kills from. And very easily that could have been a unit which could have made a big difference as the battle wore on. So something else perhaps. Micro is a little bit more vital for a unit like Horse Archers, especially a unit of expensive Horse Archers like them. So yeah, big thank you to all the players once again. Like I said, we've managed to get through this replay without my PC bursting into flames, so I'll be able to do the other Silmarillion replays that I've got here, because they're the ones that are a little bit more a little bit easier to do in the current conditions. I mean, they're not going to be one after the other, they will be spread out across the next several weeks. It's just me trying to make as much use of the time while I have it and try and fill out my schedule as much as I possibly can for the reasons that I mentioned in the recent channel update. If there is going to be a downtick in terms of quality, it will be happening over the coming couple of months really. But following on from that, hopefully we can re-expand the channel once more. And I do think, I mean, just to extrapolate on that a little bit more, I do feel as though 2023, I do want to be a little bit more creative with the channel. Like I've said a few times, we've been in survival mode on the channel a little bit over the course of the last year and a half. And I want to give the channel a go in terms of, you know, being a little bit more, casting my net a little wider, so to speak, because I do feel as though it's kind of necessary. I will do an end of year live stream, like a genuine one. I didn't do it this time around because of various things, but by the time we get to that, we'll be able to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But I won't ramble about that at the end of every battle replay that we do. It's just something that I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, as I very often do. But anyway, enough of that. Thank you to all the players for this one. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.